Beet juice, beet juice, beet juice. Welcome back, Dram fans. Do you remember when I was reviewing the Cotswolds Black Treacle rum, or whatever it's called? Really good rum, but I think it raises a few really interesting questions when it comes to British rum. Obviously there's the problem that a lot of what we're marketed as British rums these days are not. They are Caribbean rums which are imported to Britain, and they're just lightly blended and bottled, probably flavoured and passed off as a British product when they're not really. But there's also the question of, should Britain as a country even be making rum when you consider, and some people will care more about this than others, but when you consider the dark history of rum originating in the colonies, not just the British colonies, but Spanish and French. But the international sugar trade, as it first started off, has a very, very dark and sinister past. And rum is tied in with that. And with everyone talking about terroir these days, can a rum really even be called British if it's made with a base molasses which is produced on a different continent on the other side of the world? If you compare it to what we see in whisky, using a commercially produced grain which is produced in the same country or the next country over, because England, and Norfolk in particular, I'm very proud to point out, produces a lot of the barley that's used in Scotch. That's one thing, but when your base molasses, your raw materials, are literally coming from the other side of the world with a corresponding massive carbon footprint, that raises some very difficult questions. Anyway, when I was reviewing and enjoying the Cotswolds Treacle rum, I said that I'd really love to see a sugar beet spirit, because sugar beet is something that we do grow a hell of a lot of, especially here in Norfolk. And I said that it'd be really good if there was someone producing a sugar beet spirit. So obviously you couldn't call it rum, because rum, as defined in most countries, including the EU, has to be made from sugarcane. But I would love to see someone make a faux rum, or just an entirely new spirit along the lines of rum, but using a proper homegrown base material like sugar beet. And apparently there is one. And more than that, it's just down the road from me. This is Alkemy Sugar Beet Spirit. And you'll have to take my word for it that this is a very modern and understated and elegant label that really can't be done justice under my rather harsh lighting here. But it does look quite a lot better when you have it in the right light, when the light catches it properly. It's kind of textured. Well, do you call that textured? Some of it's shiny and some of it's matte, to give it that design there, that rather Illuminati triangle in the middle, which is not a coincidence, because obviously calling this alchemy, they're kind of implying that this is the dark arts of spirits, that they're making something clandestine and mysterious and new and odd and unusual, and they are. A little spoiler, they have successfully created something entirely new and innovative here. And another little spoiler, it is pretty good as well. So this stuff, Alkemy Sugar Beet Spirit, is actually the only spirit, it's the only product, apart from merch and t-shirts and stuff, that this company sells. If you go on their website, and it is a good website, I'll have the link below in the description, it's worthwhile having a little browse, because they make some interesting points about carbon footprint and ethics and the vegan status of a lot of Caribbean rums, because I bet a lot of people don't know, but a lot of refined cane sugar in general and a lot of Caribbean rums are not vegan, and also about carbon footprints and about doing things differently. And I really like that, the idea of making something that doesn't need the crutch of a category, it doesn't need a label on it, ironically, because this has got a massive label on it, but it doesn't need to be classified in order to be good. So yeah, definitely have a look at their website, but you will see on there that in terms of spirits, this is the only thing that they do at the moment. It is quite a new company. They are based in or near Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, and they've not been around for very long. So this is kind of their first effort. And first thing that I can say is that it is actually a cask age product. You can see the colour of that. It is very dark. It looks like a navy rum. Obviously it is not a navy rum. It is a sugar beet spirit, but that colouring is actually natural, contrasted to a lot of the other, like navy rum in particular is infamous for having an absolute ton of caramel colouring added to it. It's probably the most abused spirit in the world when it comes to artificial colourings. And also the Norfolk Rum Company, I'm not going to crap on them too much because they are another small company they're doing good things, but their base molasses is a sugarcane molasses which is imported from the Caribbean. And if you get one of their dark rums, it's actually white rum with caramel colouring. They are working on, at the Norfolk Rum Company, the Norfolk Spirits Company, they are working on some cask age products, but they're not there yet. So it's important to know that if you get one of their non-clear products, that is colouring. So with this one, hats off to Alkemy with their sugar beet spirit, that this colouring is actually natural. They're not just pulling the wool over our eyes, as a lot of British rums are. So yeah, Alkemy sugar beet spirit, it is bottled at 42% ABV, which is a little bit disappointing that they didn't go for 46, but on the other hand, at least they didn't go for a flat 40. And having tasted this stuff, it does actually work quite well at 42. I would say that it's one of the rare spirits where 42 is just about enough. They also tell us that this stuff is aged in charred oak barrels, and I don't think it's actually on the label, but they do give us a guarantee on the website that this is natural colour. Also interestingly, I'll show you the back label because there's a bit of waffle on there, and also a QR code which I assume goes to their website. But on the back it actually says batch 002. So this stuff, which has massively flown under most people's radar, is very new to the fact that this is only the second batch that they've made. So Alkemy sugar beet spirit. Let's get some of the glass and see what it's like. It is a cork stopper, but it is one of those pressed composite cork stoppers. Alkemy sugar beet spirit, made by my neighbours over in Suffolk, but we won't hold that against them. On the nose, quite dark and woody. It's not particularly rummish, but it does have that quite kind of burnt sugar, dark caramel note that you get on a lot of navy rums. Very woody, wood spice, dark burnt oak. A little bit of a papery note on the nose, kind of like a freshly sanded pine note, as well as a little bit of like a Coca-Cola note. So sugary, a little bit spicy. Floral hand soap, as well as some refined sugar. Slightly vegetal, burnt wood, and a little bit of caramel. So interesting, it's not weak, it's got some body, it's got some interesting notes. Not a huge amount, but it's something, it's decent. Let's see how it tastes. On the palate, oddly extractively oaky. I think that it has a curiously sugary oakiness, and I assume that that's not one thing. It's probably a combination of those charred casks and that sugar beet spirit. But definitely quite a bit of raw oak, licorice, a little bit of a dried apricot note, and I think that some of the wood spice is coming over as a little bit of a paprika note on the palate. Very woody though, burnt and dark woodiness. In particular, curiously, one of the things that I first put in my tasting notes when I first tasted this, on the palate I put burning wood with power tools. Kind of when you, like if you're using a sander or a circular saw and you're going a little bit too fast and you just, or maybe your tool's a little bit blunt and you start to burn the wood rather than cut it, and you get that burning sawdust smell. That's something that I get on the palate of this. And interestingly, when my dad tried this, he actually independently put exactly the same note under the tasting notes. Definitely a little bit of a wood smoke note on the palate, which obviously you would think is 100% coming through from the barrel char. Also getting quite a bit of vanilla and cocoa on the palate of this one. Quite a floral wood spice note with a little bit of a hint of kind of how Bowmore used to be. You know when Bowmore famously recalibrated their stills and they had that FWP note? I'll let you Google that one. But there's a little bit of that floral, spicy, perfumey note in this. Also getting a little bit of a note of sugar mice on the palate. So that's going to be like a super refined sugariness, as well as some dark treacle. When you give it some time though, I do think that you get quite a pleasant growing sweetness on the palate with this one if you give it a little bit of air. So promising in and of itself, this stuff, it does have the complexity that it does develop given a little bit of time. As for the finish, let's have one more sip. Quite light, but it is there. Interestingly, when I actually opened this, and this is, since I've been covering a lot of the new releases from new distilleries, and I've been drinking a lot of bottles of young and sometimes very young whiskey over the last year, something that I've noticed is that with the really younger stuff, it does really benefit from airing. And I think that younger whiskey, especially if it's high strength whiskey, which this is not, can really benefit from being given a little bit of air. So I shouldn't do this because I've already done it and I think this stuff has already reached the sweet point. But if you get something that is a little bit closed, a little bit harsh, just once you've got past the shoulder, just take it and give it a little shake, get some air in there, take the cork out, and when you're having some of your whiskey or rum or whatever it is, just leave it on the coffee table with the cork out, maybe for the few hours that you're having a drink with your friends or family, or maybe even leave it out overnight just to get that oxidation going. And sometimes you can find that with younger stuff, it can really improve the experience. And I did find that with this one. In particular, on the finish, I found that when I first opened this, and I had the original neck pour, it just had no finish at all. It had pretty much the same nose and palate that I'm enjoying now, but on the finish, as soon as you swallow, it was just gone. There was just nothing there at all. It was really a proper Houdini spirit. But now I would say it's still on the simpler side on the finish, but it's nowhere near as light, and it actually lingers for quite a while now. And I'm getting quite a lot of wood spice and sugary oakiness and that refined sugar note, like the sugar mice note that I got before. A little bit of a brown sugar quality and a little bit of a kind of dark treacle navy rum note. So there's definitely flavours in there. There are flavours to be had, and that finish has really improved so much since I've had this bottle open. All in all though, there are definitely a lot of flavours coming through from the cask on this one. I would really love to try an unaged version of this just out of curiosity. My gut feeling is that it probably wouldn't be better than this. I think that what they've done here with those charred oak barrels is probably a very wise decision. It works quite well, but it would still be really fascinating to try this stuff au naturel. Honestly though, I think that the sugary woody notes on this, they're actually very endearing once you get used to it. as with a lot of new spirits, it does, and a lot of new quality spirits, it takes a little bit of a recalibration before you really start to enjoy it. But I do think that this stuff is pretty good. And I don't think that anyone's mind is going to be particularly blown with this one, but it is very pleasant stuff. Kind of in the same way that a quality young grain whiskey or perhaps a rye whiskey can be good. I am very interested to see what they do in the future with this stuff. In particular, it'd be really good to see what would happen to this with maybe a longer fermentation in some second fill casks. And I'd be really, really interested to see what would happen if they tried a wild fermentation with this. Obviously, we don't have the Caribbean climate here in East Anglia, but I'm sure they could do something where they could keep it warm and give it a longer fermentation to boost those esters. Anyone who's considering giving this stuff a try, I'd say that it's probably closest to something like a cask-heavy bourbon or possibly a spicy rye whiskey, but it also has a few kind of navy rum notes to it as well. I would say that this stuff is pretty revolutionary. It is a brand new thing from a brand new distillery. It might not be world class yet, at least not yet, but it is very early days for this new product from this new distillery. And it is very decent. I'm glad that I bought this one. I think that it's interesting and it's completely unique. I'd also say that it's better than most of the first efforts from a lot of new whiskey distilleries, as well as being a lot better than a lot of the low-strength rums and rum liqueurs that you can get in supermarkets, whilst being completely different to both. Being completely honest with you, I probably won't be buying a second bottle of this stuff, but I would definitely keep an eye on this distillery in future to see what future things they come out with, especially if they come out with an older version of this or a version of this with a different twist to it. It is something that I would without a doubt try again. I think that the biggest win for this stuff for me is that it shows the massive potential of these previously unclassified spirits. I said before that I'd love to see more innovation outside the current categories, and this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to see for the future of spirits. We've obviously seen a massive rise in the popularity of whisky distilleries outside of Scotland, especially in England, but I think that we also need to go a step further than that. Quality spirits aren't just Scotch whisky. I'd love to see some success in quality spirits that are good without needing to be predefined and categorised at all. Just like this one, and I hope that we see more things like this. I have just realised that I didn't talk about the price for this one. This stuff sells for about £40 a bottle, which, considering that it is a small batch product being made by a new company and it's an entirely new product with all of the R&D overheads, I think is probably about the right price point. But I'm going to leave you with 3 questions now. And this is just a little kind of thought experiment, a little bit of food for thought for you. So, first one, would you buy this? Second question, why? Third question, are you okay with the effect of your decision on the future of spirits? So, no wrong answers there. Just a little food for thought, something to think about. I think what I'm really getting at is, do we really want another decade of just having double pot distilled malted barley spirit, and everything that falls outside of that category is just a cheap, half-assed, half-thought-out, half-effort that nobody cares about, including the producers? Because that's kind of the status quo that the current regulations and definitions force us into. Or do we want something interesting and something new? I think that these truly unique and revolutionary spirits are worth supporting at least once just to try, and I think that normalising this kind of experimental product could be really good for the future of our hobby. So thanks for joining me on this one. Let me know what you think of this one, whether you've tried it or not. I'm sure that we'll see lots of varied opinions on this one, but it is definitely something that I'd love to see become more common and more successful and more saleable. And I think that if enough of us are open-minded, then that will happen. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for joining me today, and cheers.